Okay, so good afternoon and welcome to today's departmental seminar. Today we are pleased to welcome our guest lecturer, Dr. Noah Avron Barak, who will present a talk titled Beyond Geography, Israeli Art, History, Reconsidered. Dr. Noah Avron Barak is an assistant professor in the Department of Modern Languages and Literature at the Lehigh University in Pennsylvania. Her research and teaching focus on modern contemporary Israeli art history and visual culture, art theory, and modern Jewish philosophy. Avron Barak completed her PhD at the Ben-Gurion University in 2022, guided by Dr. Ronit Milano. Before joining Lehigh, she was a postdoctoral fellow at the Hebrew University and a guest researcher at the Yale University. She has contributed articles on Israeli art historiography since 2016. Her forthcoming publications include The Metaphoric Land of Jewish Art, an Imagined History of Israeli Art in the AJS Review, and What's Your Story? Israeli Art Canon and Its Imagined Consensus in Israeli Studies Review. Thank you, Noah, for being here today, and the stage is yours.
Well, thank you, Mo, for giving me the opportunity to be here today. As I told you, I'm very excited because it's the first time I'm presenting this research that I'm invested in for 3 years, I think now, even more, to a crowd that is more knowledgeable in Jewish art and Israeli art. So I'm very excited and happy to hear what you think about it. So yeah, I will share my presentation. Okay, so I will read as we always do. I'll try to do it as best as I can. Okay, so the National Library of Israel in Jerusalem holds an ex libris titled Designed for Martin Buber by the artist Moshe Ephraim Lillian. The label depicts a brick wall reminiscent of this of the biblical temple and built in the shape of a Star of David. The walls enclose a European garden city, whose architecture evokes a neoclassical style, and the entire compound covers an island that rises out of the sea. The inscription reads, "The land is mine." This is obviously a Jewish island, if one can attribute Jewishness to an island. This ex libris was designed in 1901, the year that the Fifth Zionist Congress was held in Basel. The well-acclaimed Congress is, in a way, a starting point to historical discussions on the beginnings of Israeli art. For the Congress, Lillian and Buber collaboratively organized an exhibition entitled Jewish Art, and Buber delivered a presentation before the assembly, known today as the Address on Jewish Art. In the speech, Israeli art historiographers tell us, Buber argued for the return of the Jewish artists to Eretz Israel in order for Jewish art to grow. Yigal Salmona, former chief curator in the Israel Museum, indeed translates and quotes Buber from the speech as follows, and I quote Salmona citing Buber, the original in Hebrew. Salmona is in Hebrew. "We are slaves to many lands, and our thoughts fly to many skies. In the depth of our soul, we have no land and no sky. National art in the full sense will only grow on Jewish soil. But where, one might ask, is this Jewish soil? Eretz Israel, Salmona will answer. But is it? Or more precisely, is it solely? Is Eretz Israel the land Buber claims ownership also in the ex libris? Is the geographical Zion, Eretz Israel, indeed Buber's land, and the destination, the angel in pointing at the well-known Fifth the destination the angel is pointing at in the well-known Fifth Congress invitation? Also, of course, a work by Lillian. Or does the land and Zion also, or even more so, carry the metaphorical meaning of Zion? Indeed, the two references to land or soil made by Buber, the image and the word, appear odd with each other. Given the characteristic of the ex libris, the fantastical Jewish star-shaped island emerging from a turbulent sea cannot be seen as referring to the territory of Israel or any known landmass on Earth. Yet, the historical speech seems to draw a direct connection between foreign lands, the absence of an independent territory for the Jews, and the objectives of Zionism, suggesting a Jewish return to Eretz Israel will also develop Jewish art. Similarly, the well-known image of the diasporic Jew as encouraged to go to the land of the rising sun, Zion here, not Japan, has always been seen in the context of territorial and political Zionism and its iconography, while in practice, no distinct attributes to geographical Zion are present. Against this context, one might once again ponder which land Buber were claiming ownership in the ex libris. However, it's also worth questioning the literal interpretation of Jewish soil in Israeli art historiography, hinting that the term might encompass more than just a geographical territory. In this presentation, I aim to provide an alternative interpretation of Martin Buber's address on Jewish art, one that counters the dominant narratives within Israeli art historiography. Indeed, Israeli art history often frames its foundational paradigm around the idea of a national Israeli art style, arguing that it emerged solely from the geographical territory of Israel. This Eretz Israeli art has seemingly no diasporic influence, leaning heavily on Buber's remarks in the Congress about the origins of Jewish art on Jewish soil. I will argue that such an interpretation took Buber's words out of their intended context and led to a specific territorial paradigm on the nature of Israeli art that haunts us to this very day. So, a presentation overviews. Following a very brief discussion on translation and historical reception, the presentation will be divided into two. First, I will explore the founding paradigm of the history of Israeli art, specifically examining how Buber's speech was interpreted more than half a century post its original delivery. This delayed reception imputed a specific connotation to Buber's notion of Jewish soil, aligning it predominantly with Palestine, the geographical Zion. Consequently, his Congress address became a foundational reference for Israeli art history narratives. Within this framework, Israeli art is perceived as having blossomed ex nihilo, manifesting exclusively as modern Jewish art within Eretz Israel. Furthermore, while the diaspora witnessed creation by Jewish artists, such works were either categorized as lacking modernity or devoid of distinct Jewish essence. This prevailing paradigm posits the territory of Palestine as the sole conceivable Jewish soil, to which Buber might have claimed ownership in his quest for national art. In the second part of the presentation, I will reread Address on Jewish Art, arguing for its metaphorical content. I will juxtapose its land-related poetics with that of two earlier texts from different publications, Jewish Renaissance and Uri Lesser. Crucially, this analysis will reveal Buber's profound engagement and distinct definitions for Jewish art, by delving into his nationalistic perspectives, which was embedded in cultural revival rather than territorial claims, and accompanied by his unique metaphorical writing formations, I will argue that Jewish soil might extend beyond a mere geographical reference to the land of Israel, potentially encompassing the broader concept of Jewish community. This renewed understanding of the founding paradigm concerning Jewish land has the potential to reintegrate Israeli art history of all religions and ethnic groups, with both past and present Jewish diasporic communities and their artistic expression worldwide, as well as with the non-Jewish communities among whom Jews have lived both in the diaspora and in Palestine. Okay, so moving to translation. Buber delivered his speech on Jewish art and Jewish soil in German in 1901. References to the speech started to appear in Hebrew by scholars such as Gabriel Telpir in Gazit in 1962 and Igal Tzalmona in 1980. This is 60 to 80 years after the delivery. The English translation was made by Gilia Schmidt only in 1999. However, to this very day, there is no full translation of the speech to Hebrew. This is all quite surprising. It surprised me, considering the foundational role this speech has in Israeli art historiography, as I will show shortly. Within the speech, and as we saw in the Ex Libris, Buber employed the German word land, but also other words in German like Erdenboden, and Boden. These terms were not consistently translated with academic rigor, either to English or Hebrew, when integrated into an art historical context since the 1960s. While they might generally correspond to the English terms earth, ground, and soil, or the Hebrew equivalents of Adama, Karka, Eretz, each possess nuanced differences often overlooked by the different translators. Furthermore, on the occasions when Buber's words were cited in Hebrew, the difference between early and late translations emerged. While early translations in the 1960s by Talpir, when Buber was still alive, paired Jewish culture in Palestine and the diaspora with Buber's notion of Jewish soil, late translations focused solely on the land of Israel as Buber's Jewish land. I'm not getting into the specific examples, but in my research, I show how Buber's quotes were mishmashed and selectively picked up and brought together again, alternating their meaning, in short, taken out of context. But what is important here in this shifting interpretation of Buber's notion of Jewish land or soil is that it reveals that the central issue isn't purely one of linguistic accuracy, but more about the evolving dynamics of reception. While the Hebrew text referencing Buber in Israeli art history might have not been translated with strict academic rigor, the heart of the matter lies not in pinpointing the most precise term for soil, earth, or land as counterparts to German words, given their overlapping meaning in both languages. Instead, the focus is on the layered interpretations these terms acquire 6 to 8 decades later and the implication they bore for their authors and readers. Israeli art historians of the 1980s, drawing from Buber's words, crafted a well-constructed founding narrative for Israeli art history. This narrative, rooted in territorial Zionist perspective, naturally tied the concept of Jewish soil to the tangible land of Israel and the negation of the diaspora. This crystallized to a dominant narrative different from early storylines, from modern Jewish art originating from Jewish culture experience to Israeli art growing ruthlessly from the territory of Eretz Israel. The image that we are all familiar with conveyed this visually. So putting translations aside, I will focus our attention now to the role of Buber's speech in Israeli art history. Buber address in the Fifth Zionist Congress, while now seemingly historically significant, remained largely undiscussed in written form until decades later. When it eventually resurfaced in the 1960s in scholarly accounts, it very naturally assumed a pivotal role in the local art historiography. In a sense, this is an imagined history, meaning Buber's speech was not one that remained in collective memory, and the resonance of it developed organically. Indeed, several factors contributed to the way the speech was naturally placed in Israeli art history 60 and 80 years after its delivery. Firstly, the Fifth Zionist Congress by the 1960s had become a recognized milestone in Israeli cultural discourse and collective memory. The Congress, I stress, not necessarily a specific speech. This is because the Congress represented the core debate between cultural and political Zionism, just before the Uganda debate took central stage. Echad Ha'am and Herzl represented in this Congress the two different visions of Zionism. The former viewing Palestine, the land of Israel, as the spiritual center, and the latter as a nation-state. Where political Zionism legacy gained prominence post the establishment of the Jewish state in 1948, cultural Zionism naturally emerged as a reference point in discussions on Israeli culture, especially when considering modern art production. Secondly, the Congress, a Jewish art exhibition, stands out as the first instance of visual art showcased within a Zionist framework. Organized by Buber and Lillian, often heralded by Israeli historiographers as the first Zionist artist, this exhibition holds added art historical significance given Lillian's also brief teaching at Bezalel. Lastly, the very content of Buber's speech, his idea on Jewish art and how it fits with Zionism, along with his fame as a philosopher, retroactively made his speech a key part of Israeli art history since the 1960s. It is frequently cited and referenced when talking about the beginnings of Israeli art. Indeed, the first mention of Buber within by now canonic Israeli art history can be found in the Story of Art in Israel, edited by Binyamin Tammuz and published in 1980. In the opening chapter, Gideon Ofrat characterizes Buber's artistic doctrine as the internalization of Zionism. Ofrat further explains Buber as a philosopher which believed that, and I quote, Jewish art in the land of Israel will express more than anything our essence as Zionists. In the land of Israel, our suppressed longing for beauty and nature can flourish and express itself in works of art. He cited 1906 as the year the Bezalel School was established as the foundational year zero of Israeli art. This demarcation effectively placed post-1906 creation as Israeli art, suggesting that earlier works, even if Jewish, could not claim a place in the Israeli art narrative. In this viewpoint, Israeli art as modern Jewish art emerges exclusively from the soil of Israel. The connection between Buber's address and the ex-nihilo birth of Israeli art becomes even more apparent in Yigal Tzalmona's 1983 article in Schatz Bezalel, Trends in Zionism and the Question of Art Before the Establishment of Bezalel. In this article, Tzalmona recounts the dialogue between Max Nardau and Buber during the Fifth Zionist Congress as an historical debate. Nardau viewing art as propaganda, while Buber viewing art as one of Zionist main goals. However, Tzalmona, as we saw in the beginning of the talk, quotes Buber with no accurate context and dismissing the cultural aspect of earlier translations. Tzalmona, much like Ofrat, identified a crucial relationship between the evolution of Jewish art on Jewish soil and political Zionism, suggesting that modern Jewish art will blossom only in a Jewish nation-state. By the time 3 more decades have passed and come into the 2013 book, A Century of Israeli Art, Tzalmona no longer leans on Buber's exact words to argue on the philosopher's intentions, asserting that Buber claims, and I quote, once free in our own sovereign territory, day that diaspora Jews will become whole and therefore able to create great art. End of quote. No quotation given from the speech in this book. Indeed, art historian revisited Buber's speech against a backdrop of 30 and 60 years, and 60 years old state of Israel, actually echoed a deeply rooted political and territorial Zionist narrative, that which claimed Jewishness only to Eretz Israel, that allowing modern Jewish art to grow only there. Yet, while earlier scholars of the 1960s offered a nuanced interpretation, the canonic appropriation of the speech seems again less about Buber's original intent and more about aligning his words with prevailing Zionist ideology. This established an imagined beginning for the history of Israeli art, a founding paradigm. In this story, Buber's Jewish land or soil refers to the territory of Palestine alone. A comprehensive analysis of Buber's address at the Fifth Zionist Congress, supplemented by relevant text, provides an alternative perspective on Buber's reference to Jewish soil in the domain of Jewish and Israeli art just presented. This nuanced exploration will be the focus of the upcoming presentation section. So beyond geography, let's reread the address on Jewish art. So the figurative literary style Buber used in the Congress in December 1901 were not new for him. Throughout that year, Buber had constantly evoked poetic allusions to national lands, skies, and suns. Furthermore, as an art history student, and this is an important aspect of his life that is less known but crucial, it is not surprising that he dedicated much of his time to writing on Jewish art and artists, with a particular focus on Uri Lesser. When these references to land are extracted from the specific context of the Congress, they do not seem to singularly privilege Eretz Israel in the discourse about the potentialities of Jewish art. In fact, Buber employs land in a metaphorical manner, giving upon it an array of interpretations that range from tangible earth to a broader aspect of human communities. Two key examples of earlier essays by Buber, Jewish Renaissance and Uri Lesser, will be showcased to elucidate this point. In Jewish Renaissance, published in January 1901, a full year before the Congress, Buber employed land-related terminology when arguing about the cultural rebirth in the Jewish communities of his era. He initiated his discourse on what he coined the Jewish Renaissance, by noting that the current historical epoch was marked by a global cultural reawakening. Buber envisioned this revival as a segment of a more extensive human revival where, and I'm using Buber's own word, nationalistic groups assemble around new flags, changing their efforts from territorial possessions and expansions to an attempt at a national culture. Within his hopeful depiction of humanity's future, Buber believed that the real value of nationalism is in expressing culture, not in taking over land. Transitioning from this broader cultural landscape to the specific case of Jewish society, Buber argued for the distinctive role of Jews in the world's cultural progression during that period. He proposed that Jews, while undeniable part of this grand evolution, occupied a unique niche because their singular and historical cultural condition. Their overall mission was tikkun olam. As a result, they have spread out and will continue to be widespread, allowing their impact to extend everywhere. In Buber's perspective, the cultural blossoming of the Jews wasn't merely a nostalgic nod to bygone tradition, but symbolizes a rebirth of the Jew to his ancient role, but in a modern cloak. Interestingly, the conventional yearning for tangible land is metaphorically swapped in Buber's narrative. He still desired land, but envisioned a different kind of terrain. He underscores his symbolic intent by highlighting his era as marked by a symbol of new land. No, not return, but also not progress in the very boring conventional sense of this word. Everywhere, sleeping words emerge like green islands from the depth of the sea, a rebirth of humanity, a rule of new lands. This clear description reminds us of the booklet from the beginning of the talk. When it is side by side with Buber's utopian perception of human society, Buber's own words assist in identifying the Jewish shape territory depicted on the Ex Libris. This island does not only represent Jewish Palestine, it symbolizes a Jewish cultural community rather than solely a geographical entity. 1 month after writing Jewish Renaissance, Buber turned the attention to the Jewish artist Uri Lesser, celebrating him as a living embodiment of the, and I quote, inner possibility of Jewish art. Within this essay about Uri, that Buber introduced the significant land-based metaphor that would later become noteworthy in Israeli art history narratives. And I quote from this essay: "National art needs soil from which to develop and a heaven towards which to flow," he writes as an introduction to his evaluation of the artist's work. This statement is further clarified by Buber in the immediate context of his writing on Uri. He elaborates on the metaphor by stating, and I quote, "National art needs a unified human community from which to stem and from which to exist." End of quote. This sheds light yet again on Buber's metaphorical conceptualization of the new land for the Jews, a domain defined by a cohesive community anchored deeply in culture rather than by mere geographical boundaries. Through Buber's lens, the reception of Uri's art becomes particularly noteworthy to our new reading. He stands out as a Jewish artist representative of this symbolic new lands of Buber, while Salmona and Efrat's interpretation of Buber's would suggest such a representative artist to practice within the confines of Eretz Israel, Uri never arrived but Palestine. Given these two earlier examples, it is not surprising that Buber used land-related poetics also in his speech in the Fifth Zionist Congress. Buber's address in the Congress focused on the Jewish cultural reawakening in and through the arts, like in Jewish Renaissance. He attributed this not to the territorial pursuit of Zionism, but to Judaism's entry into Western civilization, post the Jewish emancipation in Europe. Contrary to many Zionists who viewed emancipation as illusionary, Buber believed it paved the way for the Jewish nationalism and a revival of the creative spirit. He argued that Jewish art, modern possibilities, lay not only in returning to the homeland, but in the Jews' initial emancipatory revival. Buber cleared away the conventional notion linking the second commandment to the lack of Jewish creativity, instead pointing to the prolonged Jewish oppression. Emancipation enabled Jews to attain modern education and influence Europe culture. Although this freedom was not absolute, it provided a fertile ground for rejuvenated Jewish creativity. After laying the groundwork with themes of cultural renaissance, in the introduction of his address, Buber transitioned into the body of his speech with a rich metaphorical reference to land, drawing parallel between the Jewish people conditions and the historical homeland. He asserts, and I quote, "For thousands of years we were barren people. We shared the fate of our land. A fine, horrible sand blew and blew over us until our sources were buried and our soil was covered with a heavy layer that killed all young buds." end quote. This desert, with its endless sands, represented Buber's metaphor for the cultural bareness of the suppressed Jewish creativity. By juxtaposing the fate of our land with the people's cultural stagnation, Buber intensified the layered meaning of the Jewish land. His description suggests a renewal, where getting rid of these heavy layers allowed the ground to be productive again, a bloom with lively cultural activity. In his words, he underscores the dual symbolism of land between Eretz Israel and Jewish cultural community. Later in his address, Buber stressed that emancipation marked merely the beginning. True Jewish art for Buber goes beyond that. It should naturally come from what makes something Jewish. To achieve this, artists must immerse themselves in the rich tapestry of Jewish culture, drawing from, and I quote, language, custom, naive folk art of songs and nigunim, of menorah and talitim. Having elucidated the significance of Jewish art as pivotal to Jewish nationalism, Buber extolled its benefits as a supreme educational tool. He championed the language of art, believed it to transcend textual language in revealing a person's true essence and in fostering community. His word paved a vivid image, and I quote for the first time from the complete English translation. Jewish art will be possible only on Jewish soil, just like a whole and complete Jewish culture as such. But what we have already today are cultural buds, artistic seeds, and we must nurture them here in the diaspora with a tender, loving hand until we can plant them into the soil of our homeland. End of quote. This articulation of soil by Buber once again highlights his multifaceted interpretation. At moments, it signifies the physical homeland, yet in other instances, it metaphorically points to the newly emancipated Jewish community with a diasporic fate, tilling the fertile grounds of culture. The rest of the speech was dedicated to present three Jewish art forms: music, visual art, and literature. It delved into each art form, examining their past accomplishment and their present state, emphasizing their potential for the future. Among the three arts, he considered Jewish music to be the most mature. It wasn't merely about the notes or melodies. For Buber, it was the embodiment of Jewishness. He believed that Jewish affinity for music was inherent. This idea became even more pronounced as he touched upon the Hasidic period and the klezmer tradition, viewing them as examples of pure Jewish artistic creation. He argued that the European music scene became richer when Jewish contributions as soon as emancipation allowed their participation. To bolster this growth of Jewish music, Buber underscores the need to collect all existing musical materials, emphasizing especially the importance of Yiddish folk songs and Hebrew poetry. Buber's perspective on visual art was more critical. He perceived it as Judaism's weaker artistic link, having, and I quote, developed only like a seed, like a hint in our people, end quote. Historically explained, in his role as an art historian, Jewish visual art thrives through the adornment of ritual objects housed in synagogues. The global acknowledgement of this object's artistic merit led to their systematic collection and categorization. Buber was optimistic that deeper studies would reveal the profound beauty of these collections. Yet he also acknowledged a shift. While Jewish art had traditionally been tied to religious life, he notes its growth beyond religious confines, citing the emergence of Jewish artists who, and I quote, did not only express the soul of our tribe in their creation externally in materials and themes, the Jewish character was also deeply embedded in the perception and form of these works, end of quote. In the speech, Buber highlights several artists, including Yosef Israelis, Maurizio Gottlieb, Max Lieberman, and Lillian, is co-producer of the show, praising their ability to express Jewish identity through their art. Buber expressed admiration to Uri Lester, a standout in his review, as already mentioned in his earlier texts from that year. Referencing to one of Uri's notable works, Buber remarked, and I quote, "In Jerusalem, he painted the entire Jewish people in a small group of wandering Jews who rest on a bench by the ocean, capturing the entire history of our people in one evening when heavens and ocean confront each other in yearning." End of quote. Buber celebrated Uri's ability to encapsulate profound Jewish sentiment in his art through metaphorical expressions. In this context, the concrete location of Jerusalem is absent from the painting. Instead, the city's name symbolizes the entire Jewish people. Indeed, concepts such as Jerusalem, lands, heaven, ocean, all carry a dynamic meaning and metaphorical significance in Buber's text. As Buber concluded his exploration of the visual art, his vision became evident. He aimed to establish a foundation for a flourishing Jewish artistic community in the Jewish diaspora. To realize this ambition, he proposed initiatives like art exhibitions and the founding of a dedicated Jewish publishing house. Literature, the last art form mentioned in Buber's speech, was a beacon of Jewish artistic expression. He encompassed work written across various languages under the umbrella of Jewish literature, clearing any hierarchy between them. The only criteria? They had to resonate with a national Jewish consciousness and appeal to both Jewish and global audience. Buber's admiration for Jewish literature was evident when he states, "Nothing has brought to my attention as overwhelming as Jewish literature that a new land has been born, that we have received new strengths and new voice." End of quote. This quote subtly reinforced my metaphorical reading of Buber's Jewish land, thereby challenging yet again the conventional Israeli art historic association between Jewish soil and the land of Israel. As he concluded his address, Buber underscored the intertwined role of art in Zionism and Zionism in art. He emphasized that the future of Zionist culture would hinge upon a creative community, conscious of its unique identity, viewing it as a conduct to national redemption. He passionately concluded his address. "We envision that there will be Jewish art in Jewish homes, Jewish music, Jewish paintings, Jewish readings, which is at the same time good and genuine art. Foreign art shall be relegated to second place." End of quote. Conclusions. In a completed garden, one desires to enjoy and to rest. But when we seek uncultivated soil, we wish to create new, strange, never-before-seen gardens. May they be large or small. Where there is well-being, there is your homeland, is an old lie. Not the land that we enjoy the most is the best, but that where we are the most productive. May Jewish art be such a new, strange, never-before-seen garden. End of quote. In these words, Buber crystallized the essence of Jewish art at the Fifth Zionist Congress, as going on a metaphoric geography that fosters the creative spirit of Jewishness. A year later found him penning an essay named Spiritual Center, advocating for a spiritual epicenter within the diaspora as an essential precursor to eventual migration to Palestine. In that article, he articulated his reservation about the trajectory of the Zionist movement. He emphasizes, and I quote, "I do not believe that we should consider loading people onto ships like death freight, send them across the land, and then expect the soil to perform a miracle." End of quote. For Buber, authentic Jewish art isn't solely a product of Eretz Israel. Instead, it grows from a cohesive Jewish community, one initially nurtured in the diaspora. While in 1901, Buber conceptualized Zionism primarily as a cultural movement, his pronouncement at a conference unwittingly paved the way for future art historiographies that imagined a territorial fixation on Eretz Israel. By 1980, Buber's metaphorical depiction of an untouched land of Israel was anchored to a specific Zionist ethos, that Jewish land would only mean Palestine, the exclusive cradle for the evolution of modern Jewish art. However, my examination challenges such art historical imaginations. Through my analysis, I've underscored that for Buber, the Jewish soil symbolizes also a vibrant Jewish culture commune and its potential for creativity. In this narrative, I've highlighted how Israeli art history appropriated Buber's discourse, portraying it as foundational narrative for an art form reborn only with the return of Jewish return to Palestine. This appropriation overlooks the very exhibition curated by Buber and Lillian. Misreading Buber's nuanced usage of land symbolism, many Israeli art scholars placed Eretz Israel as the epicenter of modern Jewish artistic endeavors. My exploration, however, unravels this territorial reading, revealing alternative interpretations. Revisiting Buber's speech illuminates the necessity to rethink our understanding of Israeli art history, to reimagine it. A prevalent outcome of the canonic narrative is the pre-assumption that modern art conceived outside the land of Israel, while possibly crafted by Jews, does not qualify as modern Jewish art. As a result, it doesn't factor into the desired lineage of canonic Jewish Israeli art. This narrow view as constrained local art historiography, placing its discourse within the confines of political Zionism and Western art theories. Disentangling Jewish Israeli art history from this myopic association with Eretz Israel paves the way for a more expansive exploration into its diverse roots and creative lands, delving into the domains like religious art, Eastern and Islamic art, and the decorative art as few examples. Old new geographies of creation yet to be fully explored in the context of Israeli art history. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Noah,
Thank you.
for a very fascinating lecture. And we will now open the floor for questions. So if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand using the Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Noah, for a lecture. I have one comment and one question.
Okay.
The comment is that Schmidt wasn't the first one who translated not the entire, but parts, not maybe previous translation, but parts of the speech by Avron. It was published in 1878. So
Okay.
it was not the Schmidt's translation that was the first one in English.
Okay. Thank you. I've looked so much, so that's thank you.
But the other is like a more of a question. Since Israeli art and also art history is very much trying to separate itself from Jewish art, and Jewish art was always viewed as minor, diasporic, not modernist, and so on. So how do you explain? I felt that you were kind of mixing the two notions, and that wasn't really clearly divided between the two. Because, when you quote Ofrat or Salmona, they're talking about Israeli art, not Jewish art. So how do you explain this overlapping? That I think you were using kind of either or, not really clearly distinct.
Okay, so yeah, I think this is actually my point, that we all know that Israeli art likes to separate itself from Jewish art, but in ironically way, it uses this speech, which is as I showed, really showing the importance of Jewish art to the history of Israeli art, using that speech, well, reinterpreting it in a miscalculated way, as I showed. This is the point, actually, showing that Israeli art always had a connection to diasporic Jewish culture, but reimagine it in the 1980s when this canonic. The importance of 1980 and Salmona's and Ofrat's book is because by that book, this canon emerged. And the canon that separated Israeli art from Jewish art. Before that, we see many storylines. Gamzo is really interested in Jewish art. For him, Jewish art is the beginning of Israeli art. But he doesn't use Buber because as I feel, it wasn't that known of a speech. In the 1980s, maybe after Kaufman's translation, or more interest in this epoch of the Fifth Zionist Congress, the speech reemerges and reread in the context of the current political Zionist, focusing only on the tangible land, while in fact it was a more metaphorical reading, really a more metaphorical address. So this part, this I forgot the word, space between the interpretation, the canonical interpretation, and the real meaning is what I'm trying to rethink about it, to show that it's not a good beginning to the story of the canonic story. If you want to expand the canonic story, we need to rethink its beginnings. I hope I answered the questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Noah, I have a question.
Yes.
In the invitation, you asked to show Uri Reisman's artwork, so painting. So maybe you will talk about it a little bit, and maybe how it's connect to the lecture, and is it are you reinterpreting Uri Reisman's painting in light of the new of your interpretations of Buber speech?
So the talk is more about the speech and the reinterpretation of the speech. And yes, and I use Reisman's image because it's really, for me, this is the image that Salmona decided for his 100th century of Israeli art. And I do not do, as you know, I'm not interpreting the image itself, but using it because it really shows this land related, even the trees there have no roots, okay? It's so abstract. So for me, it's really a metaphor to what I'm saying about the imagining of Israeli art as having no roots, and really focusing on the land of Israel and this, new landscapes, landscape artists, and Salmona using and deciding to take this image as an image that represents a century of Israeli art is more a manifestation of the idea of Israeli art as having no roots. So that's why I'm using this work. But yes, I also want, and in my research, I need to get into the images themselves, because the research itself, it's more a textual research. I'm rereading the texts, and I use Jerusalem of Uri Lesser because that's an image, a work that Buber himself is interpreting. So, but Uri Reisman is more illustration of Israeli art in general in one image.
Thank you. Ilya, and then
yes, see, I read this image maybe otherwise, and it in my mind really has connection to Buber. So
Okay.
Buber ideology is Hegelian essentialism. So each nation possesses its essence, Geist, nation in the maybe even in the terms of ethnicity. And when we speak about the Jews, it's maybe more ethnicity, what Buber mentioned. And the body of nation and the body of ethnic people are formed and informed by climate and soil. And the climate of the Holy Land is another light, very bright light, and other kind of colors. And all this mythology of Israeli light roots in Buber's speech. And here we see the same narration of special other non-European Israeli light. And essentialism of Buber just transformed in canon of Israeli art. Very hierarchic, authoritarian idea of canon. So essence and canon, it's not so different idea. So the difference is just in the name. For Buber, Jewish and Israeli is the same. Israeli is New Jewish. And for Israeli art historians, and not only Jewish and Israeli is different. So it's very interesting. And the exhibition and the book of Jewish art by Buber is not Jewish art, but jüdische Künstler.
Yes,
it's very meaningful title, and there are prominent European artists of Jewish origin painting on biblical subjects, but not only. We have there Solomon, a Christian saint or something else. So this is a part of European culture, Jewish Künstler. So, and now what they like as you said, as you explained, it's linked to the soil and linked to the light and linked to these colors. So I think it's just very similar ideology here we have. So essentialism and canon is almost the same.
Okay.
So I just reconnect this image to the same Buberian idea.
Okay, I'm not sure. Buber, the use of canon is my own.
No.
I'm talking about the canon of Israeli art. Buber is not talking of the canon of Israeli art.
We have no article or book about Israeli art with mentioning canon in almost each sentence. So
Yes,
yeah,
of course, yeah. But I'm reading I'm reading the address, and I'm trying to show that and reading it and showing how its reading was different in 8 years after the address was taken, was made.
Yes,
Yeah,
I agree
okay.
with you. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
More so, I just to reinforce your idea.
Okay. I wasn't sure. Thank you. Yes.
Yes, Professor David Katsuto.
very interesting lecture.
Thank you.
We have to think that when Buber wrote what said what he said in his speech in the 1901 Jewish Congress, there was not the state of Israel.
Of course, yeah.
And Zionism was only creating itself. So he is looking at something that was not existing at all. We have to understand that.
Yes.
When he speaks of soil from which to grow, or sky to where to grow now, his speech he sought to change the mind of people at that time, because people at that time spoke of Jewish art, objects, and he says this is not art at all. We need something that gives us the feeling of art. But on the other side, he speaks also of the Jewish spirit, that it have not to get lost, creating a new Israeli art or Jewish art. And this is very interesting because Buber was a philosopher later on. At that time, he was an art student, scholar, but at that time, he was a philosopher too. And he is thinking of what is Judaism. And what Salmona says, he lost this aspect of Judaism. He lost this aspect of the spirit of the Jew. And I feel that we have to understand Buber, looking at him like a Jew, not only like a diaspora Jew.
Yes. Thank you for that. Exactly. I keep telling this when I had another lecture about this. Yes, it's again more about the reading of it. As you said, it was so far in 1901. It was so far-fetched to really think about the Israeli state. So. And I remember when I gave this lecture to more philosophical and Buberian crowd, they were amazed. They asked me how Salmona could read that. Like, could he read Buber as internalizing territorial Zionism? He was not a territorial Zionist whatsoever. So really, this distance, this space between the meaning. Again, he was a Zionist. He did find, like Palestine as being a center and an important center, but it was not the essence of Israeli art, of Jewish art and later Israeli art, that I want to show that if we're using him as a starting point, we need to be able to be more nuanced, and it can help us actually open the canon and open the roots to find new in the diaspora, new places where we can use the history in order to make our history, the Israeli, because I'm an Israeli art historian, a little bit more diverse and interesting than what it is now. Rootless and, yesh mi'ayin, as we like to say in Israeli art. Thank you.
Thank you.
If we have, just a few minutes.
Yes, we have time.
Okay. I would just like to complicate the picture even more. Buber was very much influenced by Nietzsche. And as a young man, he translated even Das spoke Zarathustra to Polish. Okay. So a lot of his article that you mentioned about the Jewish Renaissance that was published in also 1901 Boston West was actually influenced by Nietzsche's philosophy. And this idea of folk and soil, it's coming from there. and he is actually talking about national art, as you said, national Jewish art, which is not emancipatory. There was already emancipation. Emancipation was in 19th century. Jews were emancipated, especially in the West.
Yeah.
Not in Russia, not in Tsarist Russia, but in the West, where Buber grew as an intellectual in Vienna and Switzerland, they were emancipated. And not just that they were emancipated, they were assimilated. So he actually talks then from the nationalistic point of view about Jewish art as a national art in order to return the Jews that were assimilated like his father was back to, or not back, but to raise because before that we were talking about religion. Now he's raising the national feelings. So I have a hard time presenting him as a, universalist and tikkun haolam person. He was trying to do something positive that was then misinterpreted by maybe Israeli historians in terms of local schools and connected to the land and specifically Palestine and so on. But he was for national art like anyone else at that time. Like, Poles and Bulgarians and Russians and Germans, they were all into nationalism. And this comes largely from Nietzsche.
Okay,
so,
but yeah.
Creating a community, commune that you're talking about, yes, but the national commune.
Yes, of course. I don't disagree with I don't disagree with you, and but I'm not sure that I feel why it's a but, because he was at that time I think that we can see more as an cultural Zionist, that's for sure. But the cultural Zionism is talking more about even autonomical, more Bund-like communities of Jewish character living together. That's the land. That's being a community together of Jewish essence. Yes, of national, ethnic, but Jewish as a disparate diaspora have this role. He's talking about it in Par Kokhba 10 years after when he's talking about what is Judaism, what is the role of the Jews in this era. So I'm not sure why this is a but. That's the question. And yes, he's Nietzsche, but he's also influenced from art historical philosophy and
Riegel, who was also turning towards
Riegel.
Yeah, I was Riegel in Vienna.
Yeah, but I think that when I read the Jewish Renaissance, I saw a little bit more nuanced nationalism. It was a nationalism not for my feeling.
He was a Zionist. He was a cultural Zionist.
Yeah.
There were other streams in Judaism at that time, like autonomists.
Yeah.
Who, like a Dubnov, who did believe of staying in diaspora and developing culture, Jewish culture in diaspora, using Yiddish as a method. Not Buber.
I'm not sure. I think that is
he was not autonomist. He was a Zionist.
Yeah, I'm
not territorial Zionist, because territorial Zionism was connected to politics. He was a cultural Zionism, but cultural Zionism was still a Zionism.
Yes, I'm not saying it's not, but as you say, cultural Zionism is not only about Palestine. It's not only about it. It's about territorial Zionism. It's about
reawakening, as he calls it, Renaissance, a new Jew, that it will be independent and so on, all the things that you said, but it's still Zionist ideology. Yes, which is different than other diasporic ideologies that were existing at the same time.
Yes, no, I do not agree with you. He is a Zionist for sure. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Anyone have another question or comment or? Okay. So, Noah, thank you once again. Many thanks for your insightful lecture, and to everyone who participated in the seminar.
Thank you
We're,
so much. And thank
thank
you for
you.
the comments. Thank
We have okay, it's not a critical clap, okay. So we are now heading into Passover break, and our department seminar will only resume on May 7th. So as always, invitation will be sent in advance. And I'm wishing you all peaceful holiday and better days ahead. שיהיו לנו בשורות טובות.
Thank you so much again.
וחג טוב.
תודה.
להתראות.
תודה רבה, ביי.
תודה רבה.